we just don't think of media and creativity as separate disciplines as much as we think of them as components of a broader strategy to build iconic brands and to generate growth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Identity Architects, the InfoSum podcast that spotlights the leaders in the media industry shaping the future of data-driven advertising. I'm your host, Ben Cicchetti, and I could not be more excited for my guest today because in the words of Taylor Swift, it's been a long time coming, because today I'm joined by WPP's Global President of Data and Technology Solutions, otherwise known as my boss, Lauren Wetzel. Lauren, welcome to Identity Architects.
Ben, finally, I used to be on the other side interviewing, and then everyone recognized just how incredibly impactful, one, your interview skills are and your voice. And so then I stopped interviewing on Identity Architects. So I am obviously thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited for this episode. You know the drill, as you say, better than most. So you know that we'll start with our quickfire questions to get to know you a little bit better. Starting with, what is your earliest memory of advertising?
Every time I've asked this, I feel bad because I honestly, I think I'm fabricating what it is because I don't know if I necessarily remember, but I think when it comes down to it, it's Christmas and it's sort of like two standouts for me. It's Coca-Cola and Christmas commercials, and then definitely M&Ms at Christmas, red and green. Definitely those two as sort of like standouts. And something you
I
just
love
grew
that.
to rely on. You're like, okay, it's the
Yeah.
holidays, and nowadays those advertisements come on like immediately following Halloween, which is hilarious.
Yeah. To this day, me and my sister text each other the first time we see the Coca-Cola advert to say it's officially Christmas now. So I'm totally with you for that. Take yourself back to those days then. What did you want to be when you were younger?
Easy, veterinarian.
Oh, interesting. So with that obviously not working out then, what was your first job in the media industry?
Avenue A Razorfish, actually, when it was owned by a Quantive ahead of it being sold to Publicis. So it was owned by Microsoft at the time, and I did like a full-time co-op, or otherwise known as sort of like a very long-term paid internship during undergrad. And I still know some folks in our industry today who kind of knew me as the intern there. I did strat planning, I did business development, I did a handful of things, and it was just an amazing crew. My very first job was working at a rectory. So I went to a Catholic school. I got an awesome, like, paid under the table job within the rectory. And technically, I did sell mass cards. So you could say that I marketed the mass cards, always
Yeah.
made the suggestion for, hi, welcome. Here's, the sort of schedule of masses. Oh, and by the way, if you would like a mass card, we sell those. So technically, you might be able to count that. But the first official job was Avenue A Razorfish.
I love that. So what do you think it was about the industry that drew you in? And then, all this time later, what keeps you in it to this very day?
Oh, people business. Yeah, I love working in teams. I love where you kind of need multiple disciplines, whether that's creativity, whether that's, a media discipline, math, science, technology, obviously data now more than ever. I like bringing together those different disciplines, and the people who sort of represent that. So played sports most of my life, so kind of a team-oriented person.
I love that. And you've kind of alluded to kind of just how people driven our industry is. And, I've obviously seen your leadership style firsthand and know how generous you are with your time and your knowledge. So what advice do you offer to people who are just starting in their career in media?
That's a good one. I'll build off of what you just said. Take advantage of people's time. There's so many, and embrace the formalized programs, especially depending on where you live. In New York, for example, there's, 212 New York has programs for mentorship. There's just so many things that are out there. I wouldn't even be able to list them all. But that represents, individuals and executives across the industry who want to help and give back, and volunteer their time. And so I would say that. And second, it's like, just be intellectually curious, absorb, read a lot, follow the sort of companies that you admire, the companies, I always call it your wish list companies, the ones that you admire, the ones that you want to work with. I think doing that really early in my career helped kind of one understand and then find a network surrounding folks at that company, but then really ground yourself in what they're saying, what they're announcing, what they're doing, what their capabilities are, how that's changing. So just a few different things.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And look, I know how crazy busy you are. So this is an interesting question for me. Two-part question. What keeps you awake at night? And then what gets you up and motivated in the morning? Your
I
calendar
totally,
might keep me awake at night.
I totally forgot this question. I will actually say it's probably emails. So when I can't fall asleep, it's typically because I have an email that I'm drafting in my mind, or I know I have to
Mm,
do it for tomorrow. And it doesn't have to be like a scary email or sort of a stressful email. It's just sort of the activity of it.
yeah.
I often think about something I'm gonna write out, and kind of visualize it in my mind. And so oftentimes if I'm lying awake, can't fall asleep, it's like I just kind of go into that mode where I'm like, what am I? I do the same thing with to-do lists, but yeah, definitely it's an outlook visual in my mind. And then what gets me up in the morning is pretty easy. It's coffee. And
Cold brew.
so yeah, yeah, cold brew. Now I'm sort of in the land of a hot brew,
Yeah.
drip coffee just because it's freezing at this moment. But yeah, definitely coffee. Occasionally my dog Debo, but yeah, coffee. It's an easy thing when I don't want to get out of bed, and it's like you love coffee. Coffee makes you happy. You will get out of bed and seize the day.
Yeah, it's great motivation. We know just how complex the industry that we work in is. It's been the job of InfoSum for a long time to describe a lot of things to a lot of people. But how would you describe what you do to a 10-year-old?
Oh, I hate this question. This one's really tough, and there's already been some folks with really great answers. Oh, I empathize for putting them in this position. I would say I often have this phrase of I care more about being the most helpful in the room, not necessarily the most intelligent. And so I think what I would do is I would ask said 10-year-old, like, what's the thing that helps you in your day? Like, what's the person or the activity or the tool or, the device, the toy, the book, like what sort of helps you in your life. And I would say like I make it my responsibility to kind of show up and do those things and sort of be that whatever example that 10-year-old gives me. And again, and sort of grounded in like that to me, that's what building great solutions, is all about. That's what, technology is all about. It's actually about being helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. Final of our quickfire questions. Everyone knows it's my favorite question. And actually, you know it very well because it was the question we used for the new starters as we kind of grew that New York InfoSum crew. If there was a song, there was a soundtrack to your life, what would it be?
Easy. And I will say when we first asked this of the very homegrown, like, first crew in the US in InfoSum and we had an offsite, I gave a different answer. But I've thought a lot about it every time I ask this question. It's definitely Dancing on My Own by Robin. It's like instant
Amazing.
joy, instant pump up, instant nostalgia for me. So it's a range of things.
I love that. And now I get to add that to the playlist, which makes me very happy. And everyone can check it out.
Yes. Oh, the playlist is so good. If for
Yeah.
anyone, quick plug for the playlist. If you have not accessed it, downloaded it, turned it on when you need a pick me up, it's definitely very diverse and it'll pick up the mood.
Yeah, it's a vibe. Link is in the description to this podcast, so you can definitely check it out. Um, we can go a bit deeper, and I think we should start by reflecting on InfoSum a little bit because 2025 was clearly a crazy year and a massive year for InfoSum. We started the year with Ramp Down, which was our campaign to kind of kick off the year and really challenge kind of the status quo in the industry. Obviously, the big news was we were acquired by WPP in April. We had an incredible crazy busy. My first experience of Cannes in June, and then we just launched Beacons in November. So looking back for you, what stands out as the biggest high of the year, and why is that so important to you?
Great question. You just in this intro explained why I'm a little tired.
It's fair.
Voice sounds a little groggy. It's actually an easy answer for me. It's the launch of beacons, and it seems maybe silly that it's a, it's not the moment and the milestone of being, acquired. I often always instill in, and you've heard this from me a million times, like how incredible that milestone is. There's so many companies that go bankrupt. There's so many companies that never make it. There's so many companies that don't have the ability to scale. And I'll, go back to why it's beacons and not the milestone of selling the company. It's because we, number one, delivered it early. Number two, since I was CEO, this was the vision, right? Like
Yeah.
I knew there was a lot of change. I knew I had to rally our teams. And I also knew we had a big fundamental challenge in the industry, which was interoperability. And I saw Beacons, which is obviously, as you know, our technology that's native for all of our clients in whatever environment their data sits in, and it allows for folks who have data in GCP to collaborate with folks who have data in AWS, or folks who have data that's stored in a Snowflake database. And I always have said, like, what has hindered data collaboration, which is so critical because no one's ever going to have all of the data that they want and all of the 360 view of your consumers. So you have to collaborate. InfoSum, the sum is greater than its parts. And, but the challenge has always been like, great, here's my system. Now move everything around. Like, forget about your investment in data infrastructure. Let's change things. And so to sort of jump over that hurdle and to build and prove that even as a part of a bigger company, that we can just get shit done and deliver early, and the market reaction to it, it's Beacons, baby. And the marketing
Yeah.
of it, obviously, Ben, it was a brilliant name. It was my first choice of the ones you shared with me, and I never looked back. I never questioned it. And you and the team did a fantastic job. So I hate being I hate choosing favorites on such amazing milestones. And it's such a team effort, but the team effort that stands out across, InfoSum and WPP and sort of this new chapter was that launch.
Yeah, I agree. It was such an incredible moment. The inside baseball on it, check me out with the American sports reference, was that, literally, weeks after Lauren was named CEO, standing up in front of the entire company and kind of painting this vision that we called InfoSum 3.0 was the kind of the third iteration of kind of how we viewed the company, was beacons. It became beacons. So to see that kind of come from that vision, Lauren kind of asking us to all go kind of all in on what knew we could achieve and we knew the industry needed, to then see that happen was just an incredible, incredible moment for the company. Obviously, the other incredible moment we've all alluded to was the acquisition by WPP. We're now kind of 9 months and counting into that acquisition. As you've kind of got integrated into the world of WP, what has surprised you most about that integration journey so far?
That's a great question. I would say the access, and collaboration and partnership with creative. It's like often, you're in technology and, media technology or marketing technology or advertising technology, and sort of data and tech, you feel like far removed at times from that notion of creativity. And I've just been so enamored and inspired and excited by my colleagues across creative. Like, obviously, again, not playing favorites, like, love everyone I've met at WPP. The talent's incredible. But I really think this notion of all of what we've been building and doing and how that can drive not just really effective media plans, but that can drive creativity. I just think it's incredible, and it's been exciting. And so every time, I'm in a pitch and we showcase the work, or when we were at Cannes and I sort of digested all the work, it's like, this is where I get to work and these are the colleagues I get to work with. And so it's actually difficult to not be inspired by it. If you like watch
Yeah.
like the Dove, you know, the AI powered, that's like the
Yeah.
perfect marriage, right? That Dove example of, taking advantage of AI, of doing it for the brighter purpose of defining what beauty is, which they've been doing for just such a long time. Of the creativity, it's just it's so exciting.
Yeah, I agree. There's something about that Dove campaign. I think I was only a few weeks into being part of WP, sat down with Toby Jenner, Chief Business Officer for WP Media. And that was the campaign he showed me as kind of an example of the incredible work that happens. So I totally agree with you. Um, obviously your legacy is being InfoSum CEO and being such an incredible leader for the organization, but also for the industry. But you're now global president, data and technology solutions for all of WPP. So, for those who might be less familiar, can you just outline what that role means, what teams you lead, and kind of the priorities you have in your head for 2026?
Yes. I'm obsessed with purpose statements, and we have sort of a work in progress one that we'll refine at the start of the year. But the starter of it is creating data driven technology and amplifying the impact of that technology through services and solutions that empower our teams, that accelerate performance, and most important of all, that drive clients' growth. And I say that because, I could shortchange it and say, we're responsible for innovating, we're responsible for building tech, we're responsible for standing up really innovative data solutions like open intelligence. And the team came together from our global media solutions organization, from our choreograph team, from our WPP open teams. And obviously, I still have oversight of InfoSum, which is a critical part of this combined org. And I think it's important, back to that statement I was talking about of being excited about being a part of WPP and about access to creativity, because we just don't think of media and creativity as separate disciplines. Um, as much as we think of them as components of a broader strategy to build iconic brands and to generate growth. And I think there's just no time that's been more challenged for marketers to drive sales and to drive growth of their brands. And so, we take advantage of this rich intelligence that we have to understand how consumers view a brand, their shopping behaviors, their attitudes, their beliefs, their likes, their dislikes. We take advantage of WPP's data assets. We take advantage of hundreds of global partners, obviously very much connected via that incredible secure data collaboration tech that we all know so well. But it's for me, it's about creating that data advantage for clients, the solutions that drive performance, the tech that our teams use to work in that integrated fashion. Because again, we apply that media lens, that production lens to everything that we do. And our tech is end to end marketing processes. So it's strategy and insights to creative to production to media to measurement. And measurement obviously always comes back again. And so that's what gets me excited is the fact that it's all of these teams that care for the services across the entire portfolio of WPP, but then doing what I love to do, which is like build technology and do it in a way where it's so clear the value that it's driving. I always say that the users of our technology, whether they're, external to WPP and it's a client or whether it's our teams taking advantage of technology, like I want them to be the hype people for what we build. And so I'm just so excited about the new role, and I'm really excited about the team I have surrounding me and the talent that's here to deliver growth for our clients.
Yeah, I agree. And as you were kind of saying that, I was reflecting on, the backstory on the InfoSum name is the sum is greater than its parts. And I think that's such an incredible legacy that I actually think will kind of continue on into WP if you think about kind of those integrated solutions, those integrated campaigns, and also just bringing all the very best data and technology across the entire kind of WP family together. I think is so incredibly important because the sum is greater than its parts. I think that's one of the legacies that InfoSum will leave. But obviously, we were, as InfoSum, we're all about innovation, hustle, and just kind of constantly having that disruptor mindset. That's always been at the heart of everything we do at InfoSum. One of our brand values was, in fact, that challenging the status quo. So, how are you bringing that spirit into WP, and how do you envision it kind of shaping the future of the org?
Great question. First, it's just being accessible, I think, and it doesn't start with me. Actually, it starts with with Brian Lesser, our fearless leader of WPP Media. It starts with Cindy. It starts with the sort of leaders who are accessible and who are basically empowering us to be able to disrupt and to innovate and to work harder. I think the second thing is just frankly rolling up my sleeves,
Yeah.
and being a participant in the change that we're trying to drive and the transformation in what we're doing, having a heightened awareness of what we're doing. And so I always want to be close to the work. But it's also about empowering leaders and giving them the license to disrupt.
Yeah.
And so making sure that people know that it's okay to acknowledge when something's not perfect. It's okay that a tech platform, isn't perfect, and it's actually, I think, really one of the pieces of feedback I've gotten, and this came from a town hall I did a week ago in London with all of our product and eng teams across the business, and it was that I said things that weren't perfect, and I acknowledge where we've gotten critical feedback. We also celebrated the wins, but sometimes the idea of just happy talk and saying that everything's perfect and everything's fine and we are flawless, like we are all human. We are not flawless. Tech is never flawless. Data is never flawless, although we work a hell of a lot harder than most people to try and get it there. But I think it's that. It's just like it's all about the culture of challenging the status quo and the license to be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's so critical. It was actually my biggest takeaway from Cannes. I saw Stephen Bartlett talk, and he talked about giving people the space to disrupt, giving people the space to experiment, to try things and to fail. And I think that's one of the things you always did incredibly importantly and incredibly well for InfoSum is you gave, if I look at myself from a marketing perspective, you gave marketing the space to disrupt, the space to try things, see if it worked. This podcast as an example, right? Like a lot of people would have said, let's not do a podcast, let's focus on something else. You gave the space for us to do it. The ramp down campaign in February, you gave us the space to do it. So I think that is so incredibly important. I think we are going to kind of bring that into the world of WP as well. One of the things I've heard you talk about very early on as we kind of gone through this WP journey is making WP the agency of choice, not of record. Can you explain to me and all of our listeners what you mean by that and why that's important?
It's just about being client obsessed. It's about showing up. I think that's another thing InfoSum for sure gets acknowledged for all the time. Like we were client obsessed. We build for our clients. And I think, when I say being the agency of choice, I almost think it's like this interesting concept that you go through these pitch processes, um, and someone makes a decision, and it's for the foreseeable future, and sort of there's all sorts of reasons why you lock that in, and I'm always grateful for that, but I think it's my job and responsibility to wake up client obsessed and to earn that right to be their agency. And I felt that way. Like I actually have a grounding in professional services, um in consulting. I always joke that I'm a recovering management consultant. I'm sure plenty of listeners uh, can agree and empathize. But people are the products, and the service is critical, and so you kind of have to constantly be asking for feedback, and you have to constantly be checking in on how you're doing, and you need to do it 10 steps ahead of when someone's then asking you the questions. And so yeah, I sort of said it one time and it sort of stuck
It's
because
stuck.
people have liked it, and I didn't think it was gonna be a thing, but I sort of said it as, you can't just rest on being, locked in a contract, and you have to win your clients every single day.
Yeah. And it's a sentiment shared by Cindy, I know, because she shared kind of how important it is that we are all client obsessed. So it's nice to kind of get that from the very top that we all know that is what we should all be focused on every day. Everything we should do should in some way contribute to kind of helping our clients grow and helping our clients achieve their goals. Um, Obviously, the industry has seen enormous amounts of disruption, consolidation, partnerships, and kind of this shift towards interoperability. Obviously, we have to keep talking about collaboration. So, how do you see the role of collaboration evolving across the advertising and data ecosystem in 2026?
I think more collaboration, not less,
Yeah.
obviously. Obviously data collaboration is a great example of that. Like connecting data sets requires partners who come to the table and where there's a value exchange for everyone across our ecosystem. And we've been hard at work on that. I also think the way I think of building, we have partners that have access to different clients that we have partners that see things from a different lens, and what I really think is important is bringing partners in before I call something final. So a very tangible example is like just on a call earlier with one of our biggest partners, and we were talking about like what can we do? How do we kick off the year? And I was like, actually, before I make a final call on this roadmap, I would like your perspective on the things we're prioritizing and the things that we're not, and whether there's something that you can do better, faster, stronger than something that I'm choosing to build. And they're like, "Oh, that's sure. Like we'll do that." And I think that to me is emblematic of where I think the industry is heading. I think it's asking more for help. I think it's creating lanes for everyone. Again, Beacons did that.
Yeah.
Beacons did that as like a very specific example in our very specific space. But I think doing that at the scale of my remit and what I oversee now is hopefully just going to create more space and more roles for partners to drive value for their businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think it's interesting because obviously collaboration is now kind of this bedrock for our industry. But for a long time, identity and identity resolution was kind of this bedrock for our industry. And we know that kind of a little bit of a year ago, Brian stood up at CES 2025 and talked about this transition from kind of a sole reliance on ID to kind of this intelligence led industry that we're going to move to. And we're seeing that particularly at WP, right? We are seeing that focus evolve from identity alone to identity and intelligence with kind of AI connecting those missing pieces. How are you looking at it in your new role and how are you defining that transition and what does that transition unlock for our clients?
Yeah, it's a great question. The transition it becomes easy once you have a client embrace this new approach and you get points on the board.
Yeah,
And your question on the value, like they want to see growth. And so when you can connect this notion of thinking about data differently, and then you show rather than just talk about this different concept, that's where the magic happens. And that's what we've been doing for our clients. And I always sort of ground people because it is sometimes like when you start getting into it, and it's funny because our podcast is called Identity Architects. And I always say, like, identity is actually a really important ingredient in the
yeah,
recipe. It just happens to be one ingredient. And I often say clients have been focused for too long, simply just asking who are my audiences, which to me is table stakes. Like knowing who bought your product is a commodity. Every brand has access to demographic data, to purchase data, to basic segmentation. And your competitors can buy the same data from the same vendors. And so
yeah,
when you're thinking about those identity assets, you're thinking about that sort of static data, you're just really keeping pace with your competitors and you're not differentiating. Um, I think the advantage, to kind of go back to that question, it's asking different questions. It's asking what matters, to my audience right now. Why are they in the market? When are they most receptive to different messages? How do they make decisions? And then what's influencing their choices? And I think those questions excite me.
yeah,
And those questions can't be answered by just a single identifier. It's as easy as that. Um, and, again, going back to knowing who bought something isn't as sexy and exciting as to what triggered that purchase. That to me
yeah,
is the advantage. And I said this earlier, it's about creating a unique data advantage for our clients. It's about them being in control. It's a lot of the same themes that we know and love. From InfoSum and seeing that potential be brought to life when you're bringing together different data sets that never were brought together before, and doing so in a secure way so people are comfortable with it, and doing so in a way where, because they're comfortable with it, people who never contributed to their data are doing it. And so it's such an unlock for answering those tougher questions, and an unlock for growth and growth audiences. And so I say static data tells you what happened, signals tell you what's about to happen. That's the difference. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive. And to me, that's what intelligent growth is all about.
I love that. You mentioned some of the themes that came out of InfoSum, and one of those themes obviously is privacy. And you've been such an incredible, passionate advocate for privacy. You've stood up on so many incredible stages. You've written so many incredible pieces of content on privacy. Why does that matter to you so much? And how would you kind of grade the industry's progress against privacy over the last couple of years?
Yeah, great question. One, it's a fundamental human right. it's
Hmm.
it's their data.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think the industry got incredibly careless with an item that wasn't specifically theirs, or if it was theirs, it was because there was some fine print that a consumer really never saw. And so I think it really just stems from being passionate about the consumers, and making sure that our industry doesn't get away from that. Um, I think it's been really nice to not only exclusively be in technology, but to be a part of an agency and to be part of the magic of creativity and of brand building, where it's bringing back, the sort of consumer into everything that we do, which I think
Yeah.
sometimes when you're just like exclusively in ad tech or martech, half of the job is like, how do we negotiate our way to sort of take advantage of this thing to, win a buck? And it's like no one mentioned the consumer once. I criticize conferences all the time for forgetting about the consumer. And so I think it just stems there. I'm an advocate for the consumer. I'm an advocate for the transparency. And it doesn't mean that there's not a ton of value when, you collect data. And I always say this 'cause I think people might think like I'm one of those people who won't pass off my email address. And it's like, no, I absolutely will, to Netflix, who I trust.
Yeah.
And then I see the value in the understanding and the insights and the recommendations and the ad experiences and sort of all of the rest of it. And I really understand it as a consumer. So it has nothing to do with like a total paranoia, especially because I know there's great tech that's protecting my data, and I know I'm clear on it. I just think that, brands have to be clear. Now, as an industry, to your second part of the question, I, I think we've not necessarily gotten it right. But I also think the parts that we've gotten right and the part that gets me excited are the companies, for example, who have organized their teams where they're prioritizing it and it's a part of their principles because they either just don't want to take on the risk because
Yeah.
they want to make sure that they're, creating that trust with the consumer. But when I see companies doing it, in markets where there isn't consistent regulation or in situations where they don't have to, but they're doing it because it's right, like that is inspiring to me. Um, and for the sort of power users of InfoSum, it was always about those companies that care about privacy. And I always remember it was funny with family and friends are like, well, who are your clients? Because I'd really like to know, because then I have a good, calm understanding now that you've explained what your tech enables and how it protects and connects, for great insights. And so I'm really proud of the companies that are doing it regardless of being told to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Look, one thing I've always been incredibly proud of from an InfoSum perspective was working under such an incredible and strong female CEO. Now, obviously, we also have Cindy Rose leading us at WPP. Why is it still vital that we celebrate not only female leadership, but also diverse leadership across the board and keep pushing for that representation across all backgrounds?
Yeah, it's easy. Diverse teams are good for business. It's not to make me feel better because I'm a female in leadership. It's just like better leadership comes from better perspectives. Um, and in my experience, diverse teams, which does include more women in senior roles, you make stronger decisions, you challenge assumptions earlier, you avoid groupthink because not everyone looks and acts the same with the same background and sort of instincts to drive decision making. They under they understand customers much better, which then leads to innovating more effectively. And ultimately, diverse teams build healthier cultures because they understand. um, how representation, changes ambition. You see more people in those leadership roles, and I get to see Cindy in her role. And, you see that at the table, and you're more likely to stay at a job. You're more likely to stretch. You're more likely to lead. You're more likely to raise your hand. And so I don't think it has anything to do with optics or quota, although there are important mechanisms to kind of hold yourself and your company accountable. It just comes down to building the strongest possible business and unlocking the full depth of talent that is available to us who build and lead teams. And so it's just diverse teams are good for business.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. You're not going to get any disagreement from my side. Look, we started this conversation talking about how incredible last year was, 2025. So now that we're in 2026, what's it going to take to top such a remarkable year?
Great question. Just helping our clients grow. I think it's as simple as that. They'll it's the beginning and it's the end, and there's no time where brands are as challenged as they are, where every industry is disrupted by AI and technology, and so it's just something else to navigate. Even figuring out the right talent on your teams is difficult to navigate. Finding consumers can be difficult to navigate. Staying ahead of competition, standing out is difficult. And so just helping our customers grow. And it's an easy metric because then that means I'm building great technology. Then that
Yeah.
means I have effective data solutions. And I'm doing my job right. And so 2026 is, the WPP client growth to the moon.
Yeah, I love that. If you thought 2025 was big, you haven't seen anything yet. Look,
Yeah.
you know this podcast better than anyone. It's all about individuals like you who are pioneering those new ways to use data to deliver better customer experiences. So, when you look to people you admire in the industry, who would you nominate for me to interview in an upcoming episode of Identity Architects?
That is a great question. I think Kevin Krim from EDO um, definitely has a wealth of experience across the media side and technology, and what he's been building for I think over a decade at EDO is incredible. Um, he's just incredibly inspiring. He would be great on podcast. I just saw him this week, so it's sort of very very top of mind. So Kevin, please join us.
I love that. We will definitely reach out and try and get him on the podcast. Look, Lauren, this has been such an incredible experience getting to finally interview you for this podcast. You know, you've done incredible things for me personally. You've done incredible things for InfoSum, and now you're doing incredible things for WP. So thank you so much for all you do. And thank you so much for being our first guest of Identity Architects in 2026.
As I always say, thank you for letting me be able to lead you. So that's just my job. Thanks, Ben.